I come in early and sit back there in that back chair, and it feels like that I'm having a private concert just for me.
Next time, take the cotton out of your ears.
It's spilling over out of my brain. I do appreciate you musicians, the singers, and there were a few extras. Let's see, Janet, I even saw you up there. Great, great, that felt good. And Pat, I appreciate the meditation. John back there doing wonderfully. All of you really who participate. And do you know, Rebecca, I don't understand this, but when you do the announcements, they're just funnier. Well, that said, I hope I didn't leave anybody out. I try to cover everybody that has a part in it. I love you. I appreciate you. You are loved. Message is a new attitude. Now, that's a stretch because I feel like that everybody here has a wonderful attitude, but sometimes we need to just think about what that means. I think I have a good attitude, but sometimes I need to be reminded of what all that includes. Do you see what I mean? So that's why I decided to talk about that today. And then the music just sort of backed me up on that everything new. I like that. I like that thought, especially at my age. Everything new sounds, that's a wonderful thing to think about, you know. One of the things I wanted to read to you in the very beginning is a thing that most of you know. My youngest son is a football coach. Well, his players, he reads this to them at the beginning of the season every year. And I think it's sort of interesting. I like it. It's by Charles Swindoll, who's a psychiatrist, wrote this. But he seemed to have it and liked it and gave it to me, and so I give it to you. But here's what it says. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me, and this is my favorite part, but attitude to me is more important than the facts. It is more important than the past, the education, the money, than circumstances, than failure, than success, than what other people think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, an organization, a home. And the remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have. Chris, I thought you would like that one. Down to one string. And that is our attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. So the very idea then is that no matter what the attitude is, now this is something that I've thought about for a long time, but no matter what one's attitude is, there is always evidence that you are right. Now, evidence. There seems to be. It's as though things, that life itself isn't what it is. It's sort of in flux. And a lot of times it's just more of what we think it is than what it really is. And so then when we have an attitude about something, we look around and we can see there's evidence. Did you know the Bible was written in the same way? because if you just read a few scriptures and read through certain parts, you would think, God is sort of mean. And then you could look at some other parts and you say, my word, God is love. That's like life is. So then this thing about having a new attitude and having a certain attitude, those things which we focus on and those things which we believe in begin to form our attitude. And attitude is that thing which begins to determine the kind of things that happen to us in our life. It's strange how that works. Here's an unusual thing. A scripture that I don't believe I ever heard anyone else mention it. And I keep things like this that I discover, I keep waiting. Maybe I'll be in one church or another church, and I'll be waiting just to hear if it's ever even mentioned. But it's 2 Corinthians, the first chapter, the 19th verse. But here's just a part of it. Okay. God is yes. Okay? I thought I was going to find it and tell it and read it to you. Just a minute. Now here, I've got it now. Thank you. Thank you, God. God is not yes and no, but in Him it has always been yes. So to me, what I gathered from this, you might gather something else, by the way. Like I said, life is sort of in flux, and a lot depends on how you see it. But the way I see that is that the energy, the God energy of the universe supports what we see and what we think we see and what we believe in. So in trying to form a new attitude, look at some of these things, because you have to realize that if you believe that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, what will God do? The energy supports you, supports your thought. If you think this world is an absolutely wonderful, wonderful place, God supports you. The energy of the universe supports that idea that is within you. How it works, why it works that way, I'm clueless. So I won't tell you that. I simply tell you that that is the way it is. Now, the thing about attitude and beliefs is that a person may say, I really don't know what I believe. Do you believe that? I mean, can you understand that that's a belief system in itself? It's a scary one, but it's a belief system that outforms into an attitude about life. Because there are people who everything is a sense of uncertainty in one's life when you begin to not really know what you believe. But here is a beginning point in a new attitude. And this is how we see ourselves. Let me tell you, is Scott here today? No. Okay, well, that's fine. He's had a lot of stuff to go through this week. I went to TCU with him Thursday. And you can't believe what a wonderful experience. We had two great speakers, and we were challenged in several different ways. But there's one of them that said something, and it was I just grabbed onto it immediately. And this man, let's see, I'm not sure that his name is Bishop Alex D. Bird. He is a black minister of a church in Fort Worth. And here's what he said in the very beginning of his message to us. He said, I just love being me. Well, up on top of that, Scott and I had gotten there a little early, and we were chatting and talking about work and things that we were experiencing. And he then said, I just love the work that I do. And I got to thinking about all this. Boy, that really does mean something to me. It's sort of like a message to me, because the truth is, I love my life. I love being me. And besides that, I love my job. Besides that, I love my marriage. It just goes on and on and on. I can't tell you. But a lot of it started out just developing a new attitude. But the new attitude seems to adjust circumstances to match the attitude you come out with. Because like I said, life is in flux. A bad attitude, to me, always gets the wrong negative results. And a good, wonderful, loving attitude always gets that which is better. I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 things besides this being a beginning point, because I really do think that appreciating oneself, knowing that you are God's, you are of God, it's like in every cell. This energy of God is in every cell of your body, and you are surrounded. It's like people wonder how that this could possibly be, because often we were taught that God is out there someplace, some figure that sort of old man look, only a lot more powerful, you see, and then described in ways, do you know? This is probably why I mention it so much. Maybe not so much about putting it into your mind, but keeping it in my mind that God is everywhere all the time and on my side. That's the other thing. But the attitude that I have directs a lot of what begins to happen in my life and in your life. So, and here is another thing. This is like stepping from that to this. But this has really come to my mind because, you know, you can rock along and be in a rather protected world. Ministers are, did you know that in the years, this is like, I started ministry back in the 50s, you know, and for about 10 years I was Southern Baptist. And do you realize that I thought that everybody had quit cursing? That's right, for 10 years. Well, then I left that last church and got in construction and discovered they hadn't. Can you imagine what a shock that was to my system? That's right. Because people don't ordinarily, well, in unity they might, but people don't ordinarily, especially in traditional religion, curse around the minister. You know. But it just seemed to me like, it must have been my youth, but it seemed to me like it had disappeared from the face of the earth. But anyway, here is the thing that calls to my attention now that is just really been on my mind lately. But it's this thing about inclusiveness. It doesn't matter about race or what religion or what sexual orientation. None of these things change the truth. Now, here is the truth, that God is in everyone. And when we have prejudice, when we have bias against this, against that, whatever it is, we are really, it's directed to God, the God energy. Forget the person back there. I'll give you an illustration of what came to me once, and I don't know how the words fell out of my mouth, but I'll tell you the circumstances. My aunt from a town in sort of southwest Texas where there really weren't, as she was growing up and living most of her life, there weren't people of color, there weren't Hispanics, later came, but at that time, and so really she had no idea. And so she's watching television at my house, and it was that time, I can't remember, this is in the late 90s, this is about 96 or 97, and there was a protest, and most of the men involved, I can't remember if there were any women or not, and it was either before the city council or the school board, and I can't remember that either, but the thing I could remember is how angry they were. They were really angry about something. So anyway, my aunt and I, it was time to leave, and so we were going back down the highway, and she said this, and it was in kindness and consideration. It wasn't like saying it in a bad way, But she said to me, what do you think they wanted from us? And she's referred to that incident. And I just sat there because I really didn't know someone who was in traditional religion how to respond to that. And the words that came to me didn't feel like mine. It felt like God speaking to me and through me. But here's what I said to her. I said, I think that it was God appearing and telling me, if I appear to you in this color and this angry, do you still love me? And that just sort of fell out of my mouth. And she said, well. And that was the last word. It was total silence until we got home. Total silence. But this thing is so important in our day and time, is to keep praying about it, keep taking a position about it, and to know that God is in everything, in everyone, and that whatever distaste we might have out there, it's not about the person. It's not about the color. It's not about the sexual orientation or religion. It's just between you and God. That's all it is, ever. So the new attitude then is, let's open ourselves up to seeing the truth of everybody, even if they don't like you. That's not important. Even if they don't agree with you on anything, that's not important. It's simply looking through appearances like that into the absolute truth of God, which is all there really is. Now, another thing. There is a certain thing about having an attitude of acceptance. I thought about this a lot yesterday, Joe, when I was there in the Methodist church with you. And I thought, there are so many things that happen in life we really don't have control over or can't change. And then we can resist that. We can let it upset us. We can react in any way we choose. We can just have and make it an eternal event in our lives, a negative thing. But it's just like this thing I remember going through in the 80s, when it seemed like every member of the time of my family chose the late 80s to pass away, to make transition. And first my mother, then my sister. And by the way, my sister's name was Emma Jean. She did change the Emma out of there after her first divorce. And just everybody knew her as Jean, but she was still Emma Jean, as well as her aunt and her grandmother on my mother's side were all Emmas. So I thought that was interesting that you should have a sister named the same as mine. But when they're all gone from my life, you can't imagine what that felt like. And then shortly after, in the early 90s, my brother, who had worked for me since 1968, he retired from the military, from the Air Force, and came to work for me, and then worked for me until he passed away. And all of them are gone. All of them are gone. And you have to come up with an attitude or with a new idea. And what began to evolve in me, and here I'm going to look at it on paper because I don't want to forget anything. But I would say they've finished their mission. They've graduated from Earth School. And they have chosen to embrace the ecstasy of the universe. Now, when you see it in that way, it does create a new attitude within yourself. because that's how we can finally say it's a celebration. It's a celebration, even though you might feel great pain at the loss, but still, it's a celebration. And we're all moving in that direction. So I'm moving a little faster than the rest of you, but still, we are all moving in that direction. And it seems like that thinking about these people, that after I left the Methodist Church, that I did a lot of thinking about all of these things and about the family and how that it's sort of hard to stay in touch with everybody. And then I thought about all my cousins, a lot of them older than me, and I said, I don't even know how many of them are left, but it gave me a moment. It gave me a moment to realize that what has happened within me is I do have a new attitude, and I do see it as a graduation. I do see it as a promotion of life. Now, when we embrace a new way of seeing things, this begins to change so much, because here is the point about living like we do. There are so many things that we need to release out of our lives and live more lightly. In other words, to lighten up in life a little bit, because you realize that terrible events that happen have only as much life as we give them. That's all they have. As long as something, we keep it in our mind and keep going over it and over it and over it, it just keeps on living and gets bigger and bigger and bigger as time goes by. So negative events in our life, it's a wonderful thing, and that's what I love about meditation. It gives you that chance to sort of clear out. Once you get started, I don't know, this is a personal thing with me, and it's not that I come recommending it, but I want to tell you something. I don't ever miss my morning meditation. I overslept one morning a little bit, which I rarely ever do. I'm usually up way before time to go and get up and everything. But still knowing that it's going to be marginal getting over to Coppell, but I took that time because to me, it has become so important. It's like getting hooked on something, and you don't want to let it go for a minute, but that's what meditation is. And if you're not getting it right, that's not really that important. But it shapes so much of what happens, and it shapes so much of the attitude that I'm talking about, trying to renew, really. I think that would have been a better word maybe than new attitude, renewing our attitude in a very positive way. But let's look at another thing, an attitude about thankfulness. There's something about, and this talking about meditation, before it starts, I think of all of the things that I'm thankful for. And let me mention one of them, because do you know that there seemed to be a little thing I was going through? I think it happened on my 80th birthday. I think that I decided it was time to start losing a little bit of my memory. That seemed appropriate for the age. But what I've done lately now, and I never write anything down, too bad about that. I was never very good at making lists. But I do have a mental list of everything I'm supposed to do concerning the people that work for me, concerning my customers, and concerning my home and so forth. But now I've gotten to where every time something comes to me, I say thank you. Because do you realize that Spirit is intimately involved with everything you do if you open that door? And so it was like, this is the new attitude I'm going to take about it. I'm going to say, look, I'm going to notice and pay attention every time you remind me of something. You can't believe how I'm shaping up. Okay. But that thankfulness it expands the way you're experiencing life. And gratitude, because you're recognizing that God is your source, the only source that you've got. But then there is finally the attitude of optimism. I've always had a little overdose of that. I may be a little over the edge, what do they call it, or over the top. Is that how you say that? A little over the top on optimism. There's places where I'm optimistic where I probably shouldn't be, you know. I'm the one that said in the beginning, only to Pat, but this place is going to fill up, and in a year we'll have to have a new building. So, so sometimes, you know, but I'm still optimistic. I still feel like, and this is the feeling that is within me, is that the exact group that needs to hear what is said, no matter who's the speaker is or who's doing the music, but that group that needs to hear that is the one that's going to show up and be there. Now, so that's how I excuse myself from being wrong the first time. But in trying to promote the optimism that I felt even a long time ago when things didn't really feel that optimistic, I noticed, well, first of all, every Sunday, no matter what, at 7 o'clock, I turned on Robert Schuller's Hour of Power. And 2 or 3 times I made it out to California and visited in Crystal Cathedral because I got so enthusiastic about just the idea of positive outlook on everything that's happening. But anyway, Robert Schuller published a Bible. It wasn't a new translation. It's simply that in that Bible, there was highlights on all of the positive things that came out of the Bible. And so there were 7,600 things highlighted in that Bible. That's a lot. I didn't buy one because I already had them underlined in my Bible. But I thought of the new attitude that optimism brings. And if you think negatively and are pessimistic, I know how hard that is. It must be. I'd never have gone through that, but I know how hard it must be to switch over and find a new way of thinking. But I do encourage you to just take a new look at everything because it is a creative force. Our attitude is a creative force. Now, I saw something, and I want to close with a little thing that I got from the Olympics. And I'm sort of about this the way I was talking about the minister that said, I love who I wrote that down immediately because I didn't want to, I do make notes sometimes because I wanted to get every word just right. Well, the same thing, they were talking about the ladies rowing team, the 9 ladies in a row that are rowing, and they won the gold medal this year, from the ladies from America. Yeah, we won a lot of medals. But here's what the announcer said that I kept in my mind and wrote down. There were 9 women rowing together as the best version of themselves. And do you know what I thought about when I heard that and I got it written down and I contemplated for a few moments on it? I said, do you know, that's what I like about coming to this church and being here every Sunday. With the Sundays I'm not the speaker, doesn't mind. I want to be here. I was asked or told in the beginning you could go speak someplace else on the Sundays. You don't have to speak here. We're not going to tie you to that. I'm here because I want to be every Sunday. I don't ever miss. Well, nearly. I mean, I'm nearly 100%, not quite. But what happens here for me now is that because of who you are and how you're thinking and how you're responding helps me to be a better version of myself. Thank you.